Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to look at Acts chapter 24, verses 1 through 27. In the previous video, I talked about how there was a death threat against Paul, and he was protected from this death threat by his nephew. And then the tribune sent Paul with some soldiers and a letter to Governor Felix, basically asking Governor Felix, what am I supposed to do with this guy? I don't see any crime that he's committed, but I have to do something with it. Well, in this section here, Paul is with Felix, and he's explaining to the governor why he's here, what charges have been brought against him, all this stuff. And the one thing that Paul admits to being guilty of is proclaiming Jesus and his resurrection. All the other charges that have been brought against him are false, right? These are just made up things, like he brought this Greek guy into the temple, right? I talked about that in the previous video. It's like, no, Paul hasn't been doing any of this. The only thing that he's guilty of, and the only thing that he will admit to being guilty of, is proclaiming Jesus and the resurrection. Now, of course, there are some people who don't want to hear that, but that's not a crime. Paul has not committed any crimes here. He's only been talking about Jesus. Well, this doesn't make Felix's job any easier either. He realizes that Paul's not a criminal. He's just been telling people about Jesus. But now he's not sure what to do with it. Just like the tribune wasn't sure what to do with it. Again, we can see a parallel here to the story of Jesus. Think about how during Jesus' trial, he was passed around from person to person, right? From Herod to Pilate and all these guys, right? And how false charges were brought against him. We see a lot of these kind of echoes between Acts and the Gospel of Luke, especially because they were written by the same author. Here, we've got Felix not sure what to do with Paul. And he kind of sits on it. He tells Paul, he's like, well, let me sort of think about it. And then the narrator tells us that Felix was basically waiting for a bribe from Paul. And he just waited and waited. Paul didn't bribe him. He waited some more. He's not making a decision one way or the other what to do with Paul. And then we're told that 2 years passed by. This is not a quick event here. Paul is sitting in prison for 2 years. Usually when we read the text, we just read it straight through and we don't really pay attention to the time markers. Because for us, it kind of sounds like it's all happening in real time. It's not. Especially here, right? We've got a 2-year time jump where Paul is just sitting there. He's not sure what his future is going to hold. After these 2-year period, we hear that Porcius Festus then succeeds Felix. He finds out about Paul being there in prison, and what does he do? He just leaves him there. He doesn't let Paul get out. He doesn't talk to him. He's like, just to make people happy, I'm just going to leave this guy here. So we've got Paul pleading his case, saying, I'm guilty of proclaiming Jesus and the resurrection. And then the leaders are like, well, yeah, we're not sure what to do with you, so sit here for 2 years. Today, as we think about our lives, as we follow Jesus, if somebody accused you of proclaiming Jesus and the resurrection, would you say, yes, guilty as charged, I do that? Maybe some people would. Maybe some people wouldn't. Maybe some people do tell others about Jesus and the resurrection. Or maybe there are some Christians that kind of keep their mouths shut about that. Even though that's important to them, sometimes they might think, well, this is just between me and Jesus. No, it's not. Part of our role in the life of faith is to tell people about Jesus. Sometimes people are hesitant about that. They don't want to be pushy or offensive or whatever the excuse is, right? But one thing we can see from Paul is that he was bold in telling people about Jesus. It's like, all these other things people think about me, they're not true. But the one thing that they do say that I will admit to being guilty of is that I do tell people about Jesus and the resurrection. Hopefully, we can learn from Paul's example and have that same courage to tell people about Jesus and the resurrection. Regardless of what else they think about you, that doesn't matter. What matters is that they know you to be somebody who proclaims Jesus and his resurrection. There's our 5-minute Bible study for the day. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.